Ending the Pursuit of Happiness by Mary Magid, Part 3, chapter on relationships. We have to get to know and be honest about our particular strategies for dealing with vulnerability and learn to use our practice to allow ourselves to experience more of that vulnerability rather than less of it. To open yourself up to need, to longing, dependency, and reliance on others means opening yourself to the truth that none of us can do this on our own. We really do need each other just as we needed a father and mother, and we do need a teacher. We really do need all those people in our lives who make us feel so uncertain. Our practice is not about finally getting to a place where we are going to escape all that, but to create a container that allows us to be more and more human, to feel more and more. If we let ourselves to feel more and more, to feel more and more different things, to feel different things more and more consciously. If we let ourselves feel more and more, paradoxically, we get less and less controlling and less reactive. As long as we think we shouldn't feel something, as long as we are afraid of feeling vulnerable, our defenses will kick in to try to get life under control, to manipulate ourselves or other people. But instead of either controlling or sequestering our feelings, we can learn to both contain and feel them fully. That containment allows us to feel vulnerable or hurt without immediately erupting into anger. It allows us to feel neediness without grasping or clinging and trying to hold on to the other person. That means really acknowledging the fact of our dependencies. I know I tend to kick into anger really fast. We can learn to both contain and feel our feelings fully well. We learn to keep our relationships and support systems in good repair because we admit to ourselves how much we need them. We take care of others for our own sake as well as theirs. We begin to see that all our relationships are part of a broad spectrum of interconnectedness, and we respect not only the most intimate or most longed for of our relationships, but all the relationships that we have, from the most personal to the most public, which together are always defining who we are and what we need in order to be fully who we are. Relationships work to open us up to ourselves. But first we have to admit how much we don't want that to happen, because that means opening ourselves to vulnerability and contingency. Only then will we begin to feel the true practice of letting ourselves experience all those feelings of vulnerability that we came to practice to escape. Walk backwards, wiggle and jiggle and jiggle. Walking backwards is really good. Bringing your head back is good. Finding your head back, thinking about back, coming back, back. I'm breathing better the more I move. The more I breathe better, the more that I can speak clearly. Anyway, acceptance is the heart of Buddhist practice. We must accept change, interdependency, and vulnerability as synonymous with human life. But how will our life look and feel different if we do accept those things? And what is the difference between truly accepting them and just resigning ourselves to their inevitability? To answer these questions, we must be clear about the basic difference between acceptance and resignation. A quick way to distinguish the two is this: acceptance feels like a starting point, while resignation feels like a stopping point. Acceptance means seeing the facts for what they are and looking forward from there, what needs to be done now. Resignation means looking at the way things are and feeling hopeless. There's nothing I can do about it. When we are resigned, we feel overwhelmed and impotent. Problems look insoluble. Our abilities and resources feel inadequate to the task at hand, and there seems no point at all in even trying. We are going to be forever a day late and $1 short, so why bother even trying? Acceptance puts process ahead of outcomes. It values wholehearted effort. Acceptance, in contrast, puts process ahead of outcomes. It accepts wholehearted effort rather than preoccupation with result. preoccupation with result, who and what we are, is defined by the quality of our engagement with this moment, whatever its content. Our lives aren't made meaningful by some score that's going to be tallied up and given to us at the end, bumper stickers to the contrary. It's not the case that whoever dies with the most toys wins. A sense of value and meaning arises from our responding completely to the moment with everything at our disposal, holding nothing back, not looking over our shoulder to see if our efforts are being appreciated or making any difference to anybody else. There's an old maxim, do what makes you anxious, not what makes you depressed. When we have to operate outside of our comfort zones, when we have to stretch ourselves to do what's unfamiliar or uncomfortable, when what has worked before isn't working anymore, and we are forced to try something new, we may initially respond with anxiety and avoidance. Acceptance means facing and feeling that anxiety and moving ahead anxiously. Acceptance means accepting risk and uncertainty, and that's not going to feel good. How often have I encountered students in therapy, clients who act as if acceptance means putting a smiley face on everything. They imagine acceptance is supposed to feel good, that it means feeling good about whatever happens. That is simply impossible. When we try it, we just end up denying or repressing all our actual complicated, ambivalent feelings until they have built up to the point where they can no longer be ignored. Then we're faced with a crisis. Not only do we have to face the problem itself, but our cherished self-image as an accepting person, as a good Buddhist, starts to crumble. Any fantasies of bodhisattvahood that I may harbor while sitting in the zendo crumble pretty quickly when I get home. A room full of small, noisy, all right, one noisy, he had at the time he was writing this book, one small child, can bring out the W.C. Fields in me. I start muttering that the one thing I've learned about since becoming a parent is that I don't like children. A student once asked me how much television time I allow my son. I answered, only half joking, as much as possible. It's the only time I get any reading done. I have no enlightened approach to parenting. As an older parent, my son was born when I was 49. I probably make up in patience what I've lost in energy, but even that has its limits. My practice is to stay honest, not to stay nice. When I can admit my own irritation and impatience and let myself be less than ideal as a parent, I can realistically begin to sort out how to best handle a complicated situation involving real complicated people. One only slightly more reasonable than the other. Whenever I find myself getting depressed about how impossible it is to keep the apartment neat and quiet, I have to remind myself to look at my own unrealistic expectations, basically expectations that a kid stop acting like a kid. At the same time, I have to accept that I really do prefer quiet to noisy and neat to messy. Acceptance doesn't mean accepting toys and clothes and dishes left lying around the apartment and never picked up. I do have to accept that I'll usually be the one to pick them up, but at least then I'm doing something and not just muttering under my breath. New students are sometimes surprised to discover that I'm not a nice Buddhist. There is a movie from a while back, Michael, in which John Travolta plays an angel with filthy, scruffy feathers and slovenly habits. Someone incredulously asks how he can be that way if he's really an angel, and he replies, I'm not that kind of angel. To anyone who has too many preconceptions about how a Buddhist and a teacher to Buddha ought to behave, I can only say I'm not that kind of Buddhist. A lot of that is simply a matter of imagining that even a lay teacher like me should look and act like one's fantasy of a monk. A deeper explanation involves how we understand the role of aspiration in our practice. Some practices actively cultivate certain qualities, behaviors, or even feelings, even if they don't literally try to act nice. Some Buddhists practice loving kindness meditations or other forms that attempt to directly encourage or bring out our capacity for compassion. It's a big world, and that style no doubt has worked for many students over the years, but my own experience with students' secret practices and with my own has kept me acutely aware of the potential downside of those approaches. So even if it's only a matter of temperament, I'll err on the side of Michael. I teach my students that the main focus of aspiration should always be emotional honesty. I first and foremost want them to be able to acknowledge and experience what they actually think and feel, and not too quickly use practice to try to feel the way they think they should feel. Together we try to make explicit their secret practice, their usually covert attempt to use practice to extirpate or deny some unacceptable aspect of themselves. Practice focuses on staying with the anxiety and anger that mark the boundaries of our comfort zone. If we can work through the vulnerability that lies behind that distress, we will emerge more open and unself-conscious. Oh, let it be. If we try to prematurely enact a role that we think of as more in line with our ideals, our negative emotions will just go underground, only to emerge in insidious and often unacknowledged forms. Compassion must begin at home. When we are truly able to be ourselves without self-hate or shame, the ways in which we relate to others begins to change. Others no longer have to play their particular role in affirming or shoring up our self-esteem. They no longer have to stay typecast in submissive or self-effacing patterns of relationships out of fear or of conflict or risking our anger. They no longer have to stay typecast in submissive or self-effacing patterns of relationship out of fear of conflict or risking our anger. As our practice deepens over time, the realization that the self is far more fluid and interconnected with everything and everyone around us opens the door to spontaneous, compassionate responsiveness. Small changes can begin to make big differences. When one person in a workplace begins to act in an open, unselfish way, the whole atmosphere can change. But we must admit that our own expanded consciousness will not by itself raise the minimum wage. There are economic and social injustices deeply embedded in our culture that require our active engagement. There are such things as exploitative jobs, racist and sexist work environments. Acceptance means acknowledging this reality and taking appropriate actions. Our practice can bring us to see that everything is perfect just as it is, but that's no excuse for having the dishes unwashed in the sink all night. True acceptance calls forth the appropriate response. When the appropriate response is especially hard and causes us all sorts of anxiety, we may all of a sudden start quoting scripture as a rationalization for our passivity, allowing us to masquerade as acceptance, allowing it to masquerade as acceptance. We try to convince ourselves we are not hurt, not angry, not bored, or unfulfilled, and that doing nothing is really our way of practicing with difficulty. Won't wash, at least not forever. When we find ourselves resigned and depressed, all the fine talk about not fixing is revealed for what it is. When it really is broke, fix it. Admit it, then fix it. Neither psychoanalysis or Zen can tell you how. Their job is simply to keep you honest about what's really going on. This book is written from the point of view of a Zen Buddhist who is also a psychotherapist. All right, so now we move. I love to move on the floor. I love it, I love it, I love it, I love it, I love it. It's better to move on the floor without cramping in the head. Oh, I'm gonna get down, I'm gonna get down, I'm gonna get down, I'm gonna get down, I'm gonna get down to my elbows and stop. I'm gonna wiggle and wiggle. Because when you do, you're moving synovial fluid through yourself and your breath but you have to be careful because like here, my neck and head are vulnerable. Holding them up, I'm gonna just go down to the ground. And release. Tight. And release. you tighten, be sure you squeeze the anal sphincter. Okay. You make fist with your head. Okay, this lifting thing I'm doing with the head, I don't want to do. So I'm going to just bend the leg up. I'm going to stretch this arm up. I'm going to push up onto my side. I'm going to roll onto my belly. And move things around a little bit. I'm going to slide my hands down under my shoulders. I'm going to spread my hands. I'm going to lift one leg and the other leg, one leg and the other leg. I'm going to push with the heels of my hands. I'm going to come up. I'm going to stop and melt back down. Oh, rocking on my forehead. Horse mutter the lips. Horses mutter when the person who feeds them comes into the barn. It's a happy sound. Just playing here, swishing side to side, wriggling, 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 jiggling, giggle inside. No, no lady who swallowed a fly. I don't know why she swallowed the fly. Perhaps she'll die. Again, this feels good for me on my knees. I guess they gave up a while ago. Dropping the chest through. Oh, when I go slow like this to teach, I go back to things I learned with Eric Schiffman. Things that his yoga feels so good. He would have you plant a hand in the middle and open. Open. I can't do this anymore. Open. 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 And then he would have you glide back down. Go down on the shoulder. And then when you're down, he would have you open this way a little, going slowly. And you can, it always feels good to repeat things that feel good. And down. Through and coming here. And folding back feels good. You put your head in the small of your back. And then you can use it to. So what I find in videos is that I go from here to there. And I'm trying to stop and go from here and stay with an awareness here a little longer. Pushing the chest through. The arms are vectors, they're very expressive, and they're attached to the spine and the flesh in a, I mean, think of what our hands do. They play basketball, they shoot, they violins and change diapers, they wash dishes. They touch faces, they punch, It's the 2024 election coming up as I'm recording this. There's a meme on Facebook. I spend oodles of time on Facebook that says November 2nd or whenever the 4th, whenever the date is in November that we go to vote, is another National Daughters Day. And the song is row, as in wade, row, row, row your vote to a place where women don't have to be afraid of anger, of being criminal, because they don't like children, can't afford children, don't want a child. And in God's imperfect world, run by us, his imperfect people, there is no place. There isn't foster care. There aren't adopted parents. There is no medical care. You risk your life. Yes, to end a life in fetus. Okay, it's ending a life. Yes. There are hard choices around that. Always have been. We go to war. We kill murderers in our prisons, even though we know that many have died who were innocent. I've blown this again. Very bad.